Right, good morning, everybody. On today's webinar, you'll have myself, Mark Churly from APPtechnology and Ben Cook from ManagementStudio. And what we'll be showing you today is how you can understand your EUC environment and get ready for Windows 11 utilizing the existing data in your estate. One of the biggest challenges when planning a migration to Windows 11 is knowing where to start. And the Engage workshop will help shine a light on the areas that you need to focus on and where potential savings can be made. With ManagementStudio, you can eliminate a lot of the guesswork and automate the heavy lifting for your projects. Without having that information to hand, planning the steps that get you to your end goal are going to be much more difficult. So that's what we're going to be showing you through today. In your organization, you will already have lots of data and tools like SCCM that will understand about your computers and your applications. You'll have tools like Active Directory to understand about the people in your estate, but you'll also have other sources of information, potentially your HR systems that can provide additional information about the locations, the business areas, or other key business information about your users and your devices. With ManagementStudio, what we can do is tie these disparate pieces of information and data together to provide knowledge. And what we're proposing to do is to present that back to you, that knowledge of your estate, back in the Windows 11 Engage workshop, which is going to be the output should you wish to go ahead following this webinar. What we're going to do is show you how to get the most out of your existing data. So we're expecting that the workshop will either help you confirm current understandings about your estate, to highlight potential roadblocks, challenges, opportunities for upcoming projects like Windows 11. And typically we expect to see and highlight some of the following benefits to you. So with planning, we can help you identify where you've got applications that are already Windows 11 ready, devices that are ready for migration, application usage and application updates. So you can see where applications are actively being used and updated in your estate. We can split out devices by make, region, location, and department for you. We can then utilize that data to help you look at where there are savings opportunities, potentially removing unused applications, which can then help reclaim licenses. We can look at devices that aren't being used and could be potentially reclaimed and recycled, and removing duplicate applications, so rationalizing that application estate down. From a budgeting perspective, we can look at where you've got devices that might be out of support, out of warranty, or simply won't run Windows 11, so you can plan ahead your hardware spend for your projects. And we can also identify where there are applications that just simply won't work on Windows 11. From a security perspective, we can help identify things like where you might have dormant accounts through levers, devices that are being unused, devices that aren't receiving updates or being managed by SCCM or Intune, as well as identifying where there might be some non-business applications used in your estate that could potentially present both a cost or a security risk to your organizations. Getting set up to run our Engage workshop is extremely painless. It's very quick to run. What we do is we will deploy a connection pack to a machine in your estate, and typically that will be over a Zoom session or a Teams meeting. That data will be anonymized into the ManagementStudio cloud, so no sensitive business information is able to be identified outside of your organization. It will then be processed, and what we will then do is typically within 10 to 15 days is we can then present back to you a live workshop where we can dive through your data and start analyzing it and showing you where there are options for savings or process planning for your projects that are coming up. As I said, it's quick to set up, but it's also very easy to set up. So to be able to run the connection pack, all you need is, for on-premise organizations, you'll need Active Directory and MECM, or if it's in the cloud, we'll need access to Azure AD and Intune. It simply needs an engineer with a read-only account, so there's no backend permissions that are required to be provided to us, and it's on a single device with a connection pack. That device just needs to have connectivity to ManagementStudio Cloud, and as I've said before, it's run over a very quick remote session. what I'm going to do now is I'm going to hand over to Ben Cook from Management Studio, and what he's going to do is walk through some sample data and give you a feel of not only how the tool set works and the data that we can present back to you in your workshop, but give you a real feel for how that workshop will run. So without further ado, let me just hand over to Ben. I'll make Ben the host. There you go, Ben, you should be host now.
Wonderful. Thank you, Mark, for that. That's really good. Welcome, everybody. Thanks for joining this webinar. My name is Ben Cook, as Mark said. So I work for Management Studio. I spend a lot of my time working with the product and working with customers, doing these engage assessments. And the plan for today is I'm going to talk you through the technology, the Management Studio solution, and try and explain how this can really help with looking at Windows 11 for you, looking at your estate, and all those things that Mark was talking about in his slides is done through Management Studio. So first of all, you may not be familiar with this solution. What is it? It's workflow, it's automation and user engagement for enterprise IT. I'm going to talk you through what that means exactly. But before we can do any of those things within Management Studio, we have to understand the estate. And Mark talked about this. The way we do this is with connectors. So we have connectors that pull data out of systems like Azure and Intune and Active Directory and Mechem. And there are other systems we can connect to with the full product, but for the Engage assessment, it's limited to those four. As Mark said, we anonymize that data and we put that into the cloud. And that enables us to do lots of different things. In terms of the product as a whole, it provides workflow and automation. So this is when you're using the full product, you have this ability to build out workflow and automation to help drive these transformation projects, also business as usual, with pretty much hands-off effort. So it means that when users are being handed new, say, Windows 11 devices, we can do things like send them surveys, send them emails, check whether they're VIPs based on maybe some HR data, and then we can drive automation by doing things like add them to a certain collection or group, do deployments via Intune, and we can automate this entire process within Management Studio. We won't be doing this as part of the Engage assessment, but this is just to show you the capabilities of the tool set. It's also got a huge feature in terms of user engagement. So whether it's sending out project updates or web-based reports or user surveys or self-scheduling, these are all options that that solution provides. I want to talk a little bit now about what happens when you first do the assessment. And this is part of the Engage assessment we're talking about. I talked about connectors a moment ago. What those do is provide us with an understanding of users and devices and the applications in use in the estate. Now, one of the big challenges we've seen with customers is there are a lot of applications to understand. And we've got a system called ACE, the App Confidence Engine. And this is applying automation to that vast number of applications that have been discovered. And what we're doing is we're harvesting previous customer decisions around application rationalization. So are applications in scope? Are they out of scope? Are they being rationalized? When I talk about rejection, that means we're saying an application is out of scope and acceptance is in scope. And what the ACE engine provides is an automated way of saying, of these 3,000 applications, we recognize typically 70% of them. So previous customers have taken an action on those 70% of those apps. And of those 70%, typically 60% will be auto accepted, and then they'll be rationalized. So that's where we take multiple versions and roll them up to the highest version. And there are lots of options around whether you just do the highest major version or just the highest version in total. It will also typically reject, so mark as out of scope, about 40% of those apps that are coming in as recognized. And again, those will go out of scope, so those won't be viewed or displayed in the default view. And then there will be a set of apps that are probably in-house apps or that haven't been actioned by previous customers, which don't have a rating, but we can still do rationalization. So we can still roll up the versions. And ultimately, what this gives you is with zero effort in terms of manual rationalization, manual reviewing, you can take all of those apps and we get them down to about 10% in scope and or 10% recognized in scope and 8% of them unrecognized in scope. So it really gives you a rapid way of understanding which applications are in scope for your transformation. And this is something we would demonstrate to you during the Engage workshop. Mark talked about how the ultimate goal of this is to have a workshop with you guys so that we can show you exactly how you should kind of move forward with this Windows 11 transformation. And ACE is a big part of that. Okay, enough slides. Let's move into the demo now. So I'm going to open up Management Studio and we'll start with the dashboard. The dashboard is highly configurable. We can have various layouts. You can see them across the top here. My overview layout here gives me an understanding of the count of apps, the number of users in scope, and the number of devices in scope. This is all good. In terms of that initial understanding, what we quite often find is there are lots of inactive accounts in AD, applications that aren't being used, devices that have been put in a cupboard and are inactive. And this data here allows you to see active users, active apps, active devices, and so on. I've got an interesting dashboard layout at the end here called OS End of Life. One of the other features that ACE provides is the ability to tell you when an operating system expires. And that might be Windows, Android, iOS. We've got all sorts of data in there. In this estate, we're just looking at PCs. And we're looking at Windows 10, I believe. And it can show us that there are 215 devices where the OS is out of support, has gone out of support in the last 6 months. And this is a global view at the top. And down at the bottom, you can break the data down by region. So I've got EMEA, an APAC, and I can see my OS support status based on each of those regions. And I can drill into these pieces of data. So I can see these 226 devices if I want to. But we're a bit short on time, so I'm not going to do that. What I would like to do is have a look at, first of all, some data. So I've talked about the connectors and how the data comes in. Now, in this sample database, we are displaying things like the first name, the last name, the SAM account. With Engage, this is anonymized, so these would come up as random numbers effectively. So you don't, we're not putting your business sensitive information into our cloud. This is all being anonymized, but for the sake of the demo, you will see first names and last names. Now, if I double click on a user here, Brian Cole, it will open up in another tab. And we can start to see some of that data that's been harvested by the connectors. So things like first name, last name, email, phone number. But also we harvest data from typically HR systems, although it can be other sources, to show you maybe which department they're in. In this case, they're in HR recruitment and where they're based. So lots of good data in here. The app usage is shown in the apps tab here. Now, it's good that Engage doesn't anonymize things like application names because they're not deemed sensitive. So you would get to see your application names. You would get to see the list of devices, but the host name and domain would be anonymized. But you still get a huge amount of value because you can understand which or certain users are using certain devices. So that is still certainly available in Engage. I'm going to come back to my list of users here. One thing I did talk about earlier was the workflow, and you can see the workflow on the left-hand side here. So, for example, people who have been sent a survey, filled it in and said there's something not quite right are these 143 people here. Okay, so I want to show you something called blueprints. That's a way of filtering my users and devices and apps based on something like department and location. I showed it for you to you for that user earlier on. I'm going to just now filter my users on a location which is EMEA. So globally, I've got about 5,000 users. In EMEA, I've got about 800. What I want to do now is we've discovered all of the applications, we've put them through ACE, so they've all been rationalized. And now I want a work plan in terms of which apps should I get ready in which order. And I'm going to do that for EMEA. So I'm selecting my EMEA users and I'm going to run something called a projection report. Let me just kick that off, run that because it takes a moment to run. The idea behind the projection report is the system knows which users are using which applications in a certain region, or it might be a certain department. It knows how many of those people are using that app. And so it can prioritize which apps to get ready each week going forward to get the most number of users ready for Windows 11. In this case, the green line that you can see coming across is the number of users ready each week. So this is where we are today, June the 26th. This is the end of week 1, week 2, week 3, and week 4. And you can see by the end of week 4, if I can get 25 apps ready per week, so I've got a total of 100 apps ready for this estate, I've got 741 users who are projected ready. Now that is 91.5% of my user base. The goal here is that by focusing on the right apps early on, I can get a large number of people able to be migrated to Windows 11. And if I come back to week 1 here, you'll see at the bottom half of the screen, I've got a list of, well, let's go to apps first, actually. If I go to my point in time for apps, this is basically saying in week 1, these are the 25 apps I need to focus on. If I do that, I've got 35 people who are projected ready. In week 2, I've got a different set of apps, another 25 to focus on. Now, we know that you can't commit to saying, well, I can definitely do 25 apps a week. So it's a bit of a finger in the air, but the idea is if we were to get those first 25 ready, we know that the first set of users to be ready is this 35 here. And in week 2, it jumps right up to 300. So 50 apps now, we've got these 300 people projected ready. So again, you could use this as a starter for thinking about who to migrate first, who to give those new devices to or to roll those upgrades out to. So that is the apps and where to focus first. Next, I want to have a quick look at those OS end of life dates again. I showed you them in the dashboard. Let's now jump into devices. Now, devices are the same as users in terms of being able to filter on Blueprint. So I could look at a certain department or a certain location. Maybe this time I'll do a department and we'll go to legal services. So these are the, how many? 295 devices used by legal services. And I've got this OS end of life report in here. So I'm going to run that. It's a built-in report. You would be able to see this as part of your ACE assessment. Let's maximize that. Just sort that by, what should we sort it by host name maybe? I just want to see some mixed up results here. So you can see quite a lot of my devices in my sample database have expired and they've got less, well, they've expired actually over 6 months ago. There are some in support, but you start to get this visibility of exactly which devices are in support and which ones are not and when it expired. And you can do things like group by the support status. So if I drag that up here, you start to see a kind of a pivot point. And this is just looking at the legal services. So that is looking at Windows 10 and when it goes out of support. The reason that could be useful is if maybe you're running a mixture of Windows 10 devices, some of which are in support, some of which are not. The ones that are not supported could be the ones that you think about upgrading first to Windows 11. So that could be a nice way of starting out. Another thing we could look at, and maybe we'll do this for a different area. So maybe I'll do this for a region now. So I'm going to come to my APAC region of devices. And this is how many? 647. I'm now going to run a different report. This is a Windows 11 compatibility report. So looking at the hardware, and again, we understand the hardware because of our connectors and putting that data in. Looking at which of my devices are supported by Windows 11 and which are not, just sorting by host name, so I get a bit of a mix up on results. So you can see some of these don't have the required TPM version and also not enough disk space, and various other things are not supported, whereas some of them are. And of course, what you can do is the same as I did before, is we can do that group by. And if I drag my overall compatibility up here, we can see how many are not compatible versus are compatible. And obviously you would get these sorts of numbers out of that Engage workshop. So a really good insight into how your hardware estate is looking in terms of Windows 11 compatibility. That wraps up what I wanted to show in the demo. One of the great things about the Engage workshop is you get to sort of have a good look around in here and dive into this data and look at some of the reports and just really explore what's possible within the tool. And we've done quite a few of these assessments so far. And I just wanted to talk a little bit about some of the interesting insights that previous customers have found with this assessment. A big one is inactive user accounts. So what we can do with the connector is we can point it at your Azure AD or your Active Directory, and we can put in all sorts of data like the last login time, whether the account's enabled, disabled. And this is normally a bit of an eye-opener. It also shows things like service accounts, so you can get a good understanding on those. The same for devices. So quite often devices are put away in a cupboard and not used for a while, or drop off the domain, or there's various things that might happen. Maybe an SCCM agent is no longer working. We can pull in this sort of data in that assessment. Something else that a few people have asked for is, can you give us an understanding of expensive software? And we've now got quite a good list of software that we know is expensive, and we can produce reports showing you usage of expensive software. Some of the Engage assessment customers have been able to give us licensing numbers, so they'll know how many licenses they own for a particular software product, and they can compare that to the usage numbers. And this is a really nice way of tallying up licensing and possibly making some savings. And the other thing to bear in mind is you can automate any of these reports. So you can send them out on a weekly basis, a daily basis. You can send out a web link to show these particular, say, inactive users. So there's a huge amount of scope with this kind of data in making savings in your projects. And that's it for me. Hopefully you found that useful. Mark, I'm going to stop sharing and hand back over to you.
What I'll do is, whilst I take back control and get my screen sorted, we did have one question come in from Lauren about ServiceNow integration. Fraser's already answered it in the chat, saying that it's available via an API, but whilst I'm shifting controls and showing my screen, can you share any more light on where ServiceNow integration maybe has been put in place in the past?
Yeah, in fact, one of my customers is doing ServiceNow integration. They have application records in ServiceNow, and they needed to match them up in our system. And so we have a piece of integration that maps there's a unique number in ServiceNow for each application, and that comes into our system. And so those two records are tied up. So the Adobe Photoshop in ServiceNow matches the Adobe Photoshop in our system. We have a new customer coming on board soon who wants some more ServiceNow integration. So there has been talk of writing a connector for ServiceNow. So that's something it hasn't been committed to yet, but it's something we're definitely looking at for the future.
Brilliant. All right, hopefully that answers your question, Lauren. All right, so Ben, thank you for running through the demonstration. So the output of this, hopefully for you, will be us being able to pull together an Engage workshop for you to see all the important information about your users, and applications. Ben's already touched on a couple at the end of his piece, but a couple of highlights that we wanted to share were Brunel University, where we were able to help them get down from 16,000 applications down to 430. So massive scope to help you understand and rationalize your application estates. Gloucestershire Hospitals NHS Trust, through using the tool set, they were able to take about 3 months effort through optimizing and doing automation on their project. So lots of real scope to help improve things as you're coming up towards looking at things like Windows 11. Thank you all for your time today. I hope you found this webinar useful. We've deliberately tried to keep it short and sweet. Couple of highlights to leave with. To get the workshop in place, it's quick to run, so we walk through that process. It's very easy to set up. There's minimal barriers to getting that set up from a technical perspective, and there's a real opportunity to be able to explore your data live, get that knowledge together and explore it live in an interactive workshop session. What I'll be doing over the course of the next couple of weeks, we'll be sending it, or tomorrow we'll get an update out to summarize the webinar. We'll share recordings if there's anyone from your teams that you think might benefit from this or wasn't able to join. Obviously, we'd be happy to hear from you with any questions that you might have following on from this session. Hold on, we've got another question coming in. Do we have any guidance or advice on deploying Windows 11 using an in-place method? Ben, do you want to cover that off? I could see you were typing.
I was going to type, but I was going to say, do you want to get in touch? But yeah, we've got lots of customers doing this. They are using the compatibility report that we provided to identify machines that can or are compatible with Windows 11. We've built a portal for one of these customers, actually. I can show you on a separate session. And their engineers are able to trigger those in-place upgrades. The way it's working is for this customer is they send out a self-booking survey. So the end user gets to choose the slot when they would like the update to be applied. And then at that point in time, we automatically add the device into the right group so that it receives the Windows 11 upgrade. And the whole thing is hands-off automated. So yeah, it works really well. But if you'd like a bit more information about that, yeah, do get in touch, please. That was Amelia.
Brilliant. All right. Well, yeah. So any questions following on this, we'll get back to you. And the final piece is in about a month's time on Wednesday, the 31st of July, we'll also have a follow-on session to this that is covering Cyber Essentials Plus and how to manage your applications securely on Windows 11, with a specific focus on looking at where you may still have some legacy applications or even some legacy application servers that are required to support your business. I'm going to close the webinar now, but once again, thank you everyone for your time today, and hopefully this was useful.
Thanks, everyone.